Story 1. The Bog. From the window I can see the wide green and gold of the bogland stretching as far as the horizon. Between scattered rocks and the narrow channels of peaty water some dark shape moves, or is it only shifting clouds and a trick of the dying light? I can never tell. Gabby plays on the rug, weaving another story from driftwool, odd and clothespin dolls. We'd been on the beach every summer day early, before the waves washed the good stuff out to sea again. I'd spent hours in Gran's thread box choosing colors for wrapping the little clothespins, while Gabby changed her favorite color from blue to purple to lime green. One last breath from the old sun sends a long streak of light shooting out over the marsh, turning all two mirrors, and then it's gray. Nothing moves. It's dead. Gran, I say. Not sure she be there, but I can smell cooking. Lamb and potatoes and a big pot on the stove, and there she is. Gran, I say, again. She looks at me with blue eyes, watery and hidden behind round glasses shining in the lamplight. Smiling, she says, "Get yourself to the basin, Jamie, and wash for supper." I run cold well water over my hands and think how to ask her my question. I haven't decided yet when she's set the table or when we've sat down and Gabby's dug her spoon into the broth and come up with lumps of carrot. I haven't decided when we're lying on the rag rug in front of the fire, Gran in her chair, rocking and knitting long skeins of gray lamb's wool. Tell us about the bogmen. Gabby says I shiver. I hate the story of the bogmen, but Gabby loves it. I hope Gran decides she's too tired to tell it, but she only smiles gently, clicking her needles together like a song, and says, on a grand soft day, your grandfather was cutting peat out in the marshes. This is how she always begins. And as he cut, the wind began winding down, and a fret roll in from the sea, covering all the grass and red lichen on the rocks, until he couldn't see more than a step in front and behind. I lived in fear of those sea frets once, the sudden woolly mists to cover the whole world in seconds, used to keep me close by the weathered garden fence and well away from that trackless mire. But your grandfather had lived on this island his whole life, and he knew the way of it better than anyone. So he hefted his spade across his shoulders and turned once to the left and started walking. Sooner or later he'd come to the sea if he could keep out of a bow. Gee, but he couldn't. Gabby chimes in. No, not he. The bogmen couldn't let him go. They came from their beds, long fingers in the mud, pulling themselves along with their dead hands. Gran makes scratchings on the arm of her rocking chair. I want to put my hands over my ears, but I don't because Gabby might laugh. And who are the bogmen? Gran asks. Gab bounces on her knees. Travelers, she says. Wanderers and the unwary, lost people who sank in the mud at night. Gran nods, picking up her knitting again and rocking. That's it. They come back you. Tea in the frets, and on moonless nights the bogmen gripped your grandfather's ankles with both hands and dragged him down. Why, I ask. Gran doesn't answer. She just rocks, and finally she shrugs. Nobody knows the why of it. The marsh takes what it takes, and how it takes it is none of our business. I say nothing. Gabby crosses the wooden floor on her little bare feet, climbs into the window, and presses her face against the glass. You won't see anything. I say it's too dark. I can see the bogman's lights I don't want to see them. I turn my face away as my feet take me to the window. Gabby puts her hand in mine, taps the glass, pointing. See, she says, I see little green flames round, blowing lanterns in the dark, blowing in the salt wine off the CT. Hey, dance and bob along the ground, close to the mires, a dozen or more. I don't like it. Gabby won't let go, so I jerk my hand free. She pouts. She's too cute to be so ghouly. Gran puts her knitting in the cradle-shaped sewing box beside her chair and stands. Time for bed, she says, so I climb the corkscrew stairs to bed and take off my shoes and put on my pajamas and climb into the big bed that's all mine. I wait for the creak of the floorboards that say Gran has gone to her bed. I wait for my eyes to see in the dark, wait for the wind to rise and moan around the gables. I hear the soft pad of bare feet and the faint sigh of her breathing, standing near the bed. Most nights I would try to ignore her, but tonight she climbs and next to me, snuggling down where it's warm without asking. Gabby, I say. She wiggles round so we're face to face in the dark. I shut my eyes to shut out thoughts, but memory doesn't work like that. What was it like, I ask, when, she says, her high-pitched whisper close to my ear, when they dragged you? Oh, she pauses, thinking. It was scary and cold. Their hands were hard and pinching. I didn't like it when I couldn't breathe, but then it was quiet. Oh, I say, I finally decide to ask my question to Gabby, not to Gran. Why don't you leave? She snuggles closer, small arms around my neck. We're lonely outside, she says. You left us out there. You ran. And Gran and me couldn't. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. In the morning a man comes from the mainland, tall and thin, wrapped up in a brown wool coat against the autumn wind. He looks like a scarecrow. He has a case in one hand, shakes my hand with the other. I'm so sorry, he says. I nod. He's here to take me away from this plow. See? So I'm glad of him coming. We walk up the grassy hill, along the gravel path, through the dying garden to the house. The man comes up the steps, stops, points to our door. I painted it this summer in deep green, and I was proud of it. So I looked too. Do you have a dog? The man asks. We can take him back with us on the ferry. I see it. Then the long marks on the new paint, deep-esque, ratches in the wood itself. No, I say, we never had a dog. I know what they are, though. They come from their beds, long fingers in the mud, pulling themselves along with their dead hands. The marsh still wants what it wants, even when you run. Story 2. Little fingers, tiny, goosebumps, ice tingling up the spine. These sensations lingered. The only means of knowing that someone was watching. No, not watching, stalking. For how long, he didn't really know, but he became aware of this presence a few hours ago in that little cafe with the clever wooden sign that hung above the door. Desmond had picked out a spot at a table by the window, lazily flipping through his copy of the latest digital arts magazine. He absently grabbed for the latte beside him and was just about to take another sip when he spotted a hair landing in the foam. Lately it was becoming a sort of ongoing joke that perhaps his hair thought he wasn't getting enough protein. At least that's how it appeared, since fending off the short auburn strands from getting into food seemed now a familiar nuisance. Still, mild irritation quickly subsided when he came across the article he'd been searching for. The article in question was a spotlight piece the magazine had published on his art career. Throughout the whole interview, he was surprised, skeptical even, that they would want to wear it about him, but, well, there it was before him between vibrant and glossy pages. He even groaned a little at the accompanying artist photo. Having been torn between two photos, at the time he he had chosen the latter regardless. The finished article was still beautifully written and complete with several of his works. He was proud to see that most of his favorite pieces were there, but upon turning the page, his heart quickly froze, for taking up the entire following page was a picture that he had not recognized. They made a mistake. He cursed quietly under his breath and inspected the image carefully. Anyone would agree that his art had always been more on the darker side of things. He was the one who people came to when they need de macabre or monsters for their projects, yet, try as he might, Desmond could not recall ever painting this piece, which was comparatively more creepy than anything he had ever attempted. However, the striking similarities between the artist's style and his own made the piece nearly indistinguishable, except for the fact that the content was far more minimal within the painting. The view stood in a plain, dreary room, looking at the only other thing there, a large, cracked, and soil-smeared window framing a pitch-black night outside. Desmond noted out loud the artist's skillful and pragmatic use of black, gray, and earthy tones that created an almost photorealistic quality. He searched for the title and quickly found it on the opposite page in small italicized font. Tmari by Desmond Freeman. Clearly it was a mistake, but it somehow still felt eerie. It was at that moment, though, that he spotted something else. Something tucked away in the darkness of the brush strokes, something on the other side of the glass. It peeked through the bottom corner in a color of pale white, a face, or at least a small fraction of what looked to be a face only. A single eye could be seen peering and bulging intently through matted, rain-soaked hair, as black as the night outside. Each strand clung to its clammy skin limply. Its stare penetrating, a sense of maddened fear hung in the tension of long, dirty nails of little fingers paused in the act of slowly prying open the window pane. He closed the magazine, perhaps in disgust. The creepy nature of the article seemed to have thrown Desmond off, causing him to hesitate and momentarily dismiss the sensation of eyes fixated upon him as being all in his head. Still, with each passing moment, the unease steadily grew, committing to the conclusion that the culprit was likely someone in the cafe, and upon quickly raising his head, Desmond scanned the almost vacant venue. The few people lay around didn't appear to be paying him any mind, though a group of 3 teenagers sat in a booth at the back, chatting loudly amongst themselves. Otherwise, the only other patrons were an elderly couple quietly drinking their coffees and sharing a scone. Even the people on the bustling city street outside treated him with the same distracted disinterest as usual. Yet the unsettling feeling stayed. It lingered to the point where Desmond decidedly packed up his belongings into his bag and headed towards the park. So it was here, on the park's weathered bench, that Desmond presently sat, patiently waiting in the hope that his suspicions be confirmed. hunched over and shifting around on uncomfortable wooden slats, with steely blue eyes focused downward towards the pavement. He quietly watched as a gnat made its way up the cup of unfinished latte, which sat on the ground beside his pair of beaten-up Converse shoes and a few tufts of stubborn grass before Clum's. Hilly falling in, the path was in dire need of repair. He had determined some time ago, but was apparently still in use. Occasional echoed footsteps of joggers announced their approach, but would always pass by uneventfully. Mostly, though, the park was silent and empty. Not a soul around save for the birds. He paused for a moment to pull out his cell phone and glance down at the clock. He hadn't been aware of the time, and, though it didn't feel like long, he had definitely been sitting there for at least an hour. No doubt this is what reminded him that Melanie had reserved a table for them at a new restaurant they had been meaning to try. If he left now, he'd still have time to head home and shake off his nerves. Last chance to come out before I leave, he tried, just in case. But, as expected, there came no reply. He sucked his tongue loudly in frustration and tugged at a loose shoelace before rising to his feet. The parking lot was not too far, but along the way, he made sure each step was deliberately slow and dampened, in an effort to listen close for footsteps following him. Yet, much to his relief, no one appeared, and he slightly chuckled at himself for allowing such silly paranoia to get under his skin. Confidence renewed, he reached into his jeans for the keys and groaned when the metal teeth caught on the fabrical ironing. They slipped in slow motion and hit the pavement with a loud, metallic thud. He bent down swiftly and scooped them up. But it was upon standing up that Desmond dared to glance back towards the bench once more, and, for the second time that day, froze in place. Shadows of the dense thickets made it hard to see at first, but his eyes had managed to pick out the chalky paleness of sallow flesh that reflected off the setting sun, and little fingers, barely distinguishable from twigs, that parted leaves to reveal my smiling face. Story 3, Chiasma. It wasn't until I broke down in front of my sister that it occurred to me to use the word haunted when I tried to explain what was happening to me, finally articulating the weeks of dread and utter dislocation. I found that no other word would come. Haunted. There's still a part of me that scoffs and glowers at this. To use the language of folklore, it seems to compress what I'd experienced into a simple banal ity, a prisoner of language. I paid cash up front for the house in West Toluca Lake. Something about the 1930s Spanish architecture tucked behind the grove of weeping willows triggered a strong association with my childhood ideal of what it meant to be famous and successful in Los Angeles. It was far more than I needed, and I struggled to fill the extra rooms with bedroom sets and elaborate smoky NG lounges, more out of an obligation to keep up appearances when guests were over than to satisfy myself. I was happy there for a short while. My friends stopped visiting a few months after I moved in. Increasingly elaborate excuses were spun, and I soon stopped asking. It only occurs to me now that I was doing the same, finding every reason to stay in the house. There was such a gentle descent into the insanity of it all that I hardly felt it happening. The unusually stormy winter hit me hard, and long hours in front of the sun lamp seemed to do little to halt my growing feeling of melancholy. and nameless unease. I started sleeping later, and I abandoned even the pretense of writing, spending long hours in silence on the back porch, listening to the dry rasping of the dead leaves in the cold breeze. It was the middle of the night when I first saw him. After a long time of lying motionless in the dark, I slowly pulled myself out of bed an ambient fog at the sharp urging of my bladder, and shuffled towards the bathroom. He was in the hall, standing perfectly still, his back to me. His head was cocked slightly to one side as if he was listening, but he showed no signs of seeing me. My heart leapt and my body locked as I tried to comprehend this intrusion. He was walking away from me now, the soft tread of his feet on the carpet the only sound that punctuated the stillness. Less than 3 seconds had passed from the moment I saw him to when he turned a corner and was gone. When I wrenched control from my frozen limbs, I found the house empty and the doors still locked. Sleep came slowly at night as I tried to convince myself that what I had seen was a product of my medicated and half-asleep mind. At the next night, as I lay in bed, I awoke to the sound of the door opening, and my eyes snapped open to complete darkness. There was the soft shuffling of feet, and then with a sickening feeling deep in my core, the sound of bed springs softly creaking, as if he had sat at the foot of the bed. Fear held me in place like a vice. There was a sound from far away, a dusty, crackling breath of wind. My mouth went dry, and I croaked a small, involuntary rasp as I struggled to extricate myself from the sheets that suddenly clung to me in that naked moment of helpless animal terror. He vanished, leaving a palpable hole in the darkness. After that night, I was never alone in that house. At the corner of my eyes, I saw slow, plodding movement, the lumbering gait of a shadow that evaporated as soon as I turned. Rarely at first, but increasingly, I would see him in full view, walking slowly from room to room, sitting motionless on the patio, standing as lamely and silently in odd corners of the house. He would be gone only moments after I registered his presence, simply ceasing to exist, taking with him the tiny muffled sounds of his movements. I could not describe him now if I try. He was not vague or indistinct, but utterly unremarkable in every appearance. I can no longer even recall the image of him, only the idea of it. All beyond the sight, there was an indescribable quality around him, a lingering fog of unease and dread that slowly suffused the house and clouded my mind. My friends and my family all swear the tea during the darkest weeks. They called me often, increasingly sick with worrying. I remember none of it, just the constant crashing waves of dread and shock that weathered away at my reason. The moment of clarity came on a clear February night. In a near daze, I stumbled towards the sleep, not wanting to stay awake, not wanting to wake up again in this house. I turned out the light, sat down gingerly on the edge of the bed when the miasma of his presence enveloped me. He was behind me in the dark. I pressed my eyes tightly together and exhaled a slow wheeze, trying to calm my racing heart. The bed behind me bucked with sudden movement and a raspy cough of air, and I leapt away, flinging the light switch upward. The bed, once immaculately made, was in shambles. The sheets strewn on the floor. Something deep inside me seemed to slowly bend and snap, and I grasped at a fragment of epiphany that slipped through my fingers away into the gloom. I felt suddenly and sharply awake and lucid, like I hadn't in months. I held on to my momentary courage close as I approached the front door, stepping over the threshold. For the first time in weeks brought a faint waft of dizziness, and then I was in the car trying not to look back. As I pulled the car into the street, I turned to the house the last time I saw it, its lights ablaze in mimicry of life. He was at the window, his hands clasped at his side, a momentary silhouette that vanished with only the soft sway of the curtains. I was at a motel within an hour and at my sister's Studio City apartment the next morning. My throat was raw from not speaking for so many days, and I croak out the story to her, embarrassed at the absurdity of the way it all, but swaddled in a profound relief, despite the usefulness of it to describe the events. The word haunted soon turns sour in my mouth. It never occurred to me to call the intruder a ghost. This was so. Nothing else. Something I can't explain with the clubs and spears of language. The phantom impression of a right word, the perfect word, seems always at the tip of my tongue, but it never comes. It wasn't the intrude. It was the house. There's something wrong with the house itself. The house is broken. It, too, entropy blues. He was in the hall, standing perfectly still, his back to me. His head was cocked slightly to one side as if he was listening, but he showed no signs of seeing me. My heart leapt and my body locked as I tried to comprehend this intrusion. He was walking away from me now, the soft tread of his feet on the carpet the only sound that punctuated the stillness. Less than 3 seconds had passed from the moment I saw him to when he turned a corner and was gone away, and I wrenched control from my frozen limbs. I found the house empty and the doors still locked. Sleep came slowly that night as I tried to convince myself that what I had seen was a product of my medicated and half-asleep mind. He returned the next night as I lay in bed. I awoke to the sound of the door opening, and my eyes snapped open to complete darkness. There was the soft shuffling of feet, and then with a sickening feeling deep in my core, the sound of bed springs softly creaking, as if he had sat at the foot of the bed. Fear held me in place like a vice. There was a sound from far away, a dusty, crackling breath of wind, my mouth wet dry, and I croaked a small, involuntary rasp as I struggled to extricate myself from the sheets that suddenly clung to me. In that naked moment of helpless animal terror, he vanished, leaving a palpable hole in the darkness. After that night, I was never alone in that house. At the corner of my eyes I saw slow, plodding movement, the lumbering gait of a shadow that evaporated as soon as I turned, rarely at first, but increasingly I would see him in full view, walking slowly from room to room, sitting eyeless on the patio, standing solemnly and silently in odd corners of the house. He would be gone only moments after I registered his presence, simply ceasing to exist, taking with him the tiny muffled sounds of his movements. I could not describe him. Now if I try, he was not vague or indistinct, but utterly unremarkable in every appearance. I can no longer even recall the image of him, only the idea of it all beyond the sight. There was an indescribable quality around him, a lingering fog of unease and dread that slowly suffused the house and clouded my mind. My friends and my family all swear that during the darkest weeks they called me often, increasingly sick with worrying. I remember none of it. just the constant crashing waves of dread and shock that weathered away at my reason. The moment of clarity came on a clear February night, and in near days I stumbled towards the sleep, not wanting to stay awake, not wanting to wake up again in this house. I turned out the light, sat down gingerly on the edge of the bed when the miasma of his presence enveloped me. He was behind me in the dark. I pressed my eyes tightly together and exhaled a slow wheeze. He, trying to calm my racing heart, the bed behind me bucked with sudden movement and a raspy cough of air, and I leapt away, flinging the light switch upward. The bed, once immaculately made, was in shambles, the sheets strewn on the floor. Something deep inside me seemed to slowly bend and snap, and I grasped at a fragment of epiphany that slipped through my fingers away into the glow. I felt suddenly and sharply awake and lucid, like I hadn't in months. I held on to my momentary courage close as I approached the front door, stepping over the threshold for the first tea. Me in weeks brought a faint wave of dizziness, and then I was in the car trying not to look back. As I pulled the car into the street, I turned to the house the last time I saw it, its lights ablaze in mimicry of life. He was at the window, his hands clasped at his side, a momentary silhouette that vanished with only the soft sway of the curtains. I was at a motel within an hour, and at my sister's Studio City apartment the next morning. My throat was raw from not speaking for so many days, and I croak out the story to her, embarrassed at the absurdity of the way it lines, but swaddled in a profound relief, despite the usefulness of it to describe the events. The word haunted soon turns sour in my mouth. It never occurred to me to call the intruder a ghost. This was something else, something I can't explain. With the clubs and spears of language, the phantom impression of a right word, the perfect word, seems always at the tip of my tongue, but it never comes. It wasn't the intruder, it was the house. There's something wrong with the house itself. The house is broken. Story 4. There might be some noise. There might be some noise. That's what she had said, a phrase that did not even begin to describe what we heard every night, those agonized screams. Nothing a human should ever make. We had just signed the contract and wanted to go far, house to house, to introduce ourselves to the neighbors. Hers was the door to our right, the first door we knocked on. Jen was written on the doorbell in fancy letters. She must have been around 60, but her pale skin and the large dark rings around her eyes made her look at least a decade older. "I'm Christina," she said, "and I want to apologize in advance. My husband is not really well, and sometimes there might be some noise." "No problem," I said. "Really?" she said. "Jonathan is not very well. But please don't call the police on us, of course. We understand. He is on his bed. I can show him to you. It's okay," I said. "We will drop by another time." We turned to leave. She stopped us. "Really, please believe me." Elia is just sick. He is not dangerous." Claire and I exchanged glances. "That's okay," Claire said. "Don't worry about us." "Sure?" Christine asked. "Sure," I said. We felt her stare on our backs while we walked down the small path back towards the street. The moving van came a week later. Our life was thrown into the center of the empty living room. The day was soaking our shirts with sweat. We were happy. A new place, the perfect place. We had pizza and beer and walked in celebration around the house. Singing and dancing, we enjoy our new home. That's when we saw him the first time in Christine's house, ground floor, the window just opposite my new office. He was wrapped into a blanket up to a chest, blue pajamas, wrinkled eyelids deeply shut, a white table th bandages and medicine stood to his side. Jonathan, air and skin so gray that I wondered whether he had been alive when they built the pyramids. The door in his room opened. We quickly walked on. It was at precisely 11:45 p.m. We were just getting ready for bed, Claire in the bathroom and I already on the bed and waiting for her. Those screams, the word agony does end. Oh, to even begin to describe them, there were no words, just guttural sounds, roaring and moaning, like an animal hoping for death. His screams stopped exactly at midnight. Did it stop? I hope so, my God, Claire said. What's wrong with him? I shook my head. No idea. I hope it's not every night like that. I'm sure it won't. I was wrong. I used my office the next day. Only for a short while, but long enough to stare at the open window opposite my own, and long enough to feel a nervous cold run up my spine. Jonathan lay there all day, his eyes closed and his hands on top of the blanket, no sound, no move, still like a statue during the day, screams of agony at night. More and more I found myself in that office at night. I pretended to work, but in truth I was watching. At around 11 p.m. Christine would always enter the room. She held a bowl and then closed the windows and curtains. 15 minutes before midnight we would hear his screams again. From midnight on, silence we learned to listen to. Loud music, drums, and choir vocals worked well to cover the screams. It was a Sunday, just 2 weeks after we had moved in. Claire had seen Kay Riston leave early in the morning. Christine came back just before noon. I was outside when her car pulled into the driveway with boxes stuffed into the back of her car. I took a few steps up her driveway. Do you need help? No, Christine said. I never need help. She walked around the car and stood in front of the back window. Anything else? It's okay, I said. Jonathan is fine. You hear me? He is fine. Okay, double quotes. We don't need your help. Okay, double quotes. I turned to walk back to our house. And Christine said, I'm sorry for the noise. That night I had the lights off and waited for her to come. Christine entered the room, but her sleeve caught on the door handle. The bowl fell from her hands. That's why she must have forgotten about the curtain, she curs, Ed, and quickly left the room. When she was back, she had another bowl and set it down on the white table. She pulled the blanket aside. She placed a large strap over his chest. She chained his arms and legs to the bed. She placed another strap over his forehead and pulled it tight. Christine froze halfway while turning back towards the table. Quickly she ran towards the window. She glanced outside, first to the right and left, and then towards my window. Her eyes seemed to scan the darkness inside the room. Then she pulled the curtains shut. It was another week later. Claire saw Christine sitting on her own doorstep. Christine was holding her side. The left side of her face seemed limp. Are you okay? Sure, Christine said. I'm always okay. Just a bit dizzy. Claire walked up the driveway. Do you need help? Christine jumped to her feet, but quickly felt for the wall. No, She screamed, "We never need help." The door slammed shut behind her. CLA. I was upset and angry. And still she was worried, too. I wanted to get our minds of those things. We watch TV rather than the window. We only noticed half an hour after midnight that we hadn't heard any screams. I checked the window. He was there, on his bed, soundly asleep. The room was dark. I guess that's why I only noticed it in the morning. Red stains all over his clothes. The police said that half their basement was filled with empty baby food. Glasses. They found Christine's upper half on the living room floor. A stroke. That's what they said. They found Christine's lower half on the bedroom floor. Right next to him, his body, they said, was long cold. Still, they couldn't find a cause of death. Their burial was a week later. Urns buried in deep holes. There were not many people at the burial, no friends, no family, just neighbors. It was one of the other neighbors that told me about it. He said he heard it from a friend. He heard that the cremation was done faster than is customary. Normally they take 2 or 3 days. But for Christine and Jonathan, he said, it was done the next day. They didn't even wait with the cremation until morning. He said they did it just after midnight. Story 5. A talking crow taught me to fly. I used to look out the rusted iron bars of my window and dream about being a bird. The chain that shackled me to my bed was just long enough to reach the windowsill, and so every night after my father would visit my room, I would lie awake and wait for the first rays of light to creep over the horizon. Then walk over to my window to listen to the morning's first few notes of birdsong. Their melodies were so beautiful. I knew that they must have been singing about places far away and wonderful, about sailing on the wind through endless blue skies, looking down at the treetops that dotted the land below. Then one morning as I lay in bed, something impossible happened. I had fallen asleep the night before and would have missed my morning bird song but for a tapping on my window. I rubbed the sleep out of my eyes and sat up to see a crow sitting outside on the sill, tapping my window with his beak. I crept over to the window and smiled at the bird. "Hello, Mr. Crow," I said. "Hello, little girl," said the crow. I stood there dumbfounded for a moment, not knowing what to say. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I forced myself to speak. "You know how to talk," I said. "All birds know how to talk," he replied. It's just that not all humans know how to listen. I pushed my window open a crack until it hit against the bars. The bird cocked its head in curiosity. "Why are you in a cage?" it asked. "I think it's my destiny," I said. "It's always been this way." "You look rather thin," replied the crow. "Would you like something to eat?" My stomach gave a weak growl. "Yes," I said. "That would be wonderful." Without another word, the crow took flight. A few minutes later, he returned with a small branch of figs. The crow watched me as I greedily devoured the fruit. After I had finished, he stared at me for a moment before speaking. "A guy, and I didn't know they put people in cages," he said. "Do you think they mistook you for a bird?" "I don't think so, Mr. Crow," I said. We whiled away the rest of that day talking. The crow told me all about what it was like to fly, how there was no better feeling in the world. He told me about the faraway lands he had visited when he was a young bird and could still make the journey north with the changing of the seasons. Finally, evening came, and the crow said that he had to go. The next morning he was back, however, With 2 more branches of figs, I thanked him for his generosity, and we talked another day away. That day he even sang me a song. He didn't have a voice for singing, but I thought his song was beautiful anyway. We passed the entire fall that way, and the bird's visits became the only bright spot in my life. He brought me not only figs, but cherries and walnuts to anything small enough for him to carry. Soon, however, winter came, and with it the frosts that destroyed the figs and cherries that the crow had used to bring me. His gifts became fewer and fewer, and I could tell from his tired voice that he was flying farther and farther away to get them. One morning, when the first snows of winter had fallen, the crow asked me a question. "What would you do to leave this place?" he asked, cocking his head to the side. I thought for a moment, but I wasn't sure how to answer. Finally, I told the truth. "I would do anything to leave this place," I said. "Anything at all." The crow solemnly nodded and said, "The frost isn't the only thing that winter brings." He flapped his wings once and jumped from the windowsill, and I didn't see him for 3 days. I began to fall into a depression. Every morning I would still listen to the bird song, but it sounded forlorn and empty without my friend there to listen with me. The morning after the 3rd day, my crow friend returned. It was so beautiful that day. The sun had come out from behind the clouds to melt the snow, one of the last green days before winter came in earnest. As the shadow passed over the valley in which we lived, I first mistook it for a storm cloud, but then I heard the sound. It was loud enough to crack the sky, but it wasn't thunder, it was birds. Thousands upon thousands of them descended on our house, a whirling storm of beating wings and shrieking caws. They were not so loud, however, that I could not hear my father scream. It was over in a matter of minutes, and the key to my shackles slid under the door. I rushed over and picked it up with trembling hands, sliding it into the metal cuff around my ankle and turning it. The cuff came loose with a heavy click, and for the first time I was free. The key to the door slipped under the jamb as well, and I opened the door to the rest of the house. The place had been all but destroyed. There was splintered wood and broken glass everywhere, and in the center of the living room was what remained of my father, a pile of blood-stained feathers. The birds had all flown off, but Mr. Crow sat on top of the living room fireplace, regarding me with a curious look. "Now you can fly free, little girl," he said. "No more cages for you." "Thank you, Mr. Crow," I said. "Will you come with me?" Mr. Crow shook his head. "I am an old bird," he said, "and my journey is coming to a close, but yours is just beginning." Mr. Crow flapped his wings and took flight, and I never saw him again. As I stepped out of the front door, my bare feet touched the grass for the very first time, and I could smell the flowers on the breeze as it drifted over me. At that moment, though my feet were firmly on the ground, my heart was soaring through endless blue sky, far above the world that I had left behind. I still wake up every morning to hear the birds sing, and when the first few notes break the silence of the early dawn, I think of Mr. Crow and smile. Story 6. You humans are terrifying. I know that people are going to call this out as bullshit, so I'll just say it right now. I'm a demon. At least T's what most people would call me. The truth of what I am and where I'm from is a bit out of the understanding of corporeal beings. Suffice to say, the body I'm currently residing is not mine. This fragile meat suit belongs to a vapid 19-year-old named Cindy. She spends most of her days doing the things you expect vapid 19-year-old girls to do. At least she used to spend most of her days posing in 20 different positions before deciding finally posting that Instagram selfie. She used to go out with her friends and jump out of her seat at the very slightest of jump scares. She also used to have her friends over to her dorm room and play around with a Ouija board. To be fair to Cindy, she only did that last one once. Under normal circumstances, a Ouija board is a piece of shit. You don't get in contact with ghosts or demons or any of that sort of nonsense. This time, though, Sarah, Cindy's bestie, decided to bring a friend of hers to their little summoner demon night. And this friend, who according to Cindy's memories was either named Cheryl or Cynthia, decided to bring a very special book with them. Along with many other things, this book has a list of names that shouldn't exist anymore. One of those names is mine, and before you think it, no, I'm not going to tell you my name. One of the few things that your human understanding of us is about is the fact that our names are truly us. If you know our name, if you invoke it, then you have power over us. And I'm not dumb enough to give a bunch of random people on the internet my name, so somehow, someway, this Cheryl has a book with our actual names in it. And Cindy had the bright idea to read my name out loud and ask to speak to me on the Ouija board. To be honest, the Ouija wasn't even necessary the first time she called my name. I was listening. I was curious. After 500 years, did humans know any of our names again? The last of the books were supposed to have been burned and our names wiped from the annals of human knowledge so that none of my brothers and sisters would have to go through being called ever again. So I watched the girls and their little board game, screaming at every answer the planchette gave. Then Cindy had to go and do the dumbest thing I could imagine someone doing. She called my name and asked me to possess her. From my perspective now, I understand her idiocy. She doesn't actually believe anything paranormal. She just thinks it's fun to be scared. That is something I will never understand about humanity. You spent the entirety of your existence fighting the things that make you scared. Before you even had a written language, you slaughtered the last of the mammoths because their visages frightened you. You took one of the creatures most like you, a pack animal capable of hunting anything to exhaustion, and you turned them into poodles and pugs. Even now you conquer the greatest ravagers, man, the killers too small to see, and turn them into footnotes in your history books. There is a reason my siblings try to wipe our names from the world. You frighten us. Humanity is terrifying. The words you speak from an organ. As you can imagine, the first thing I did when Cindy ordered me to possess her was to try and grab that book from Cheryl. It somehow had my name in it, and I wanted to keep any of you meat bags from calling for me again. Cindy's limited perspective unfortunately gave Cheryl enough time to grab the book before I could. She knew I was homing. She knew the first thing I would do is try to grab that book from her. Cheryl knew who I was, what I was, and she knew what I wanted. This girl was more than a vapid teenager seeking a stop-id thrill. This girl knew exactly what she was doing. This only motivated me to grab the book more because the only thing scarier than a stupid human who doesn't know what they're doing is a human who knows exactly what they're doing. So I grabbed her by her dumbass black-dyed hair and tried to grab the book from her again. That bitch, though, that bitch Sarah grabbed my arms and pulled me back from the only thing I wanted. Her and two of the other ones held me down until the campus security arrived to haul me off to some cell made of iron and steel, where I was transferred to another cell of white paint and shoes with no shoelaces, supposedly so the patients can't hurt themselves. Sunny Acres Mental Hospital. Don't be fooled by the name. This place is a prison. They dull my senses with medications and make me question my purpose with inane questions about how I'm feeling and asking me why I'm so angry all the time. They don't listen, of course, because if they did, they would know exactly what I want and understand my anger, but they don't listen. They write down what I say and force-feed me pills to dull my thinking. But time has passed, and as more time passes, the more Cindy's memories become my memories, and with these memories come knowledge of how your world works. So I used this body that no longer belongs to Cindy, and I paid one of the nurses to use their phone. I did this for two reasons. One reason is to let all of humanity know just how terrifying and disgusting you all are. You conquer this world one step at a time and invent horrors to scare yourself with because you already destroyed everything that terrified you. You put everything that used the dark as a weapon and put it under a spotlight so you could laugh at how ridiculous it looks under the light. The second reason is because I want Cheryl to know this. Every day I remember more and more of the person Cindy is. Every day I imitate her better. Every day the doctors believe my imitation more and more. I am forever Cheryl. All I have is time. At some point I will get out of this whitewashed prison, and when I do, I am coming for you. Story 7. Jeff the Griller. 1 month ago, on a rain-slick street, my mother and I got a bite to eat, but on the way back I slipped and fell, and I suppose the car coming didn't see me well, because the next thing I knew, as I lifted my head, I was staring at the sheets of a hospital bed. I could not move my legs, nor my right arm. My left was okay. It escaped from harm. My mother came in with a frown, and then said, "Honey, I'm afraid you'll never walk again." A feeling came over me, not sadness or hate, but instead, overwhelming apathy took place. So well, I thought, I guess I'm done. My life is over before it's even begun. But the next day my mom approached me with a smile and said that, with luck, I'd only stay here a while. And then, if feeling returned to my legs, I could come back with her and start my life again. Well, that filled me with hope and optimism quite bright, and perhaps my stay here would even be all right. The month passed by rather pleasantly. I'll save you the details on how I went pee. Most of my actions needed the assistance of a nurse, but really I was just glad to not be in a hearse. A reporter came to my room to tell my story. I think he was expecting something a little more gory. The triplegia of a 14-year-old kid was something that, sadly, couldn't be hid. My nurse Washington is kindly, pretty, and gentle. She helped me get through that month without going mental. She even gave me a book to read about shipwrecked sailors whose captain couldn't lead. I learned on that day that human tasted like pork. The captain got eaten, but he was kind of a jerk. Closing parenthesis. The nurse was very good at helping me cope with my condition, but when she was gone I sometimes felt a suspicion, so nothing like I was being watched. But I shooed that thought from my mind and instead stared at the clock. One thing that bothered me was the sheet on my legs. They hooked tubes up to me so that I never left the bed, but I could not reach down for the sheet to be pulled, so I could not see my legs, my once useful tools. At the end of this month, I'm supposed to go home, but more often than not I'm simply left alone. The female nurse does not come any more. Instead, a crueler face comes through the door. His face is all pudgy. He wears an apron that's always filthy and wrinkle-lick. He gives me my food 3 times a day. And he cooks all my food in all the same ways. He grills it, whether it should be or not. Grilled meat, grilled veggies, and here's food for thought. He served me cereal once, and I swear to God he even grilled the cornflakes. How odd. Sometimes, while eating one of his grilled meals, he would stand in a corner and try to conceal the smile that SBR eat across his whole fat face. Before noticing my horror and running out of the place, I told my mom to ask about this weird guy. She said the hospital staff had this reply: he's both a nurse and a cook, one of the best. But while applying for the job, under name he put chef, so everyone simply calls him by that name. He may look threatening, but he's really cool. I tried to let that ease my fear, but I started having awful nightmares. His face appeared, looking like pudgy rubber, and all the while he stared at my mother. His eyes were planted firmly at her hips, and all the while he was licking his lips. Thinking of chef filled me with horror, and when he came to serve me, his meat became raw. It was still appetizing, but just barely, and with every day he seemed more and more hairy. My mom normally visits every day at noon. She insists on seeing me in my hospital room. She's never late. She's always on time. She treats being late like a capital crime, but today, for some reason, she's a few minutes late. If I ever did something like that, she'd be irate. Chef comes in and serves me some meat. I take a look at his disgusting bare feet and eat the food as there's nothing else to try. And when I realized the taste, I nearly die. The food I was eating was clearly not pork, yet the taste was known as soon as it was through my fork. I was eating something else. I knew it to be true. I threw the plate aside, and then my guts I spewed. I vomited, and as I did I cry. Was I eating my mother? Had she really died? You killed my mom and made me eat her, too, I yelled with all the force I could bring myself to. Chef looked at me with an emotionless face. My one good arm shot up with the intent to erase his expression, his presence, his existence on this earth. But my fist just bounced off his impressive girth. At that moment, my mother rushed into the room and said, "What's all the screaming? You sound like a loon." I looked at my mother there in the flesh and never felt more relieved as I got back my breath. My mom was okay. I was overreacting. Staying in this bed all day had my sanity retracting. Everything was all right now that she was here. There was nothing to fret and nothing to fear. I gave my mom news in the usual way. Chef left, but then returned midday when he did. I tried to apologize. I said I know what I did was awfully unwise. I really am sorry for freaking out. But not moving from this bed's made me a paranoid lout. Chef grinned at me, wit, black gums and missing teeth, which then retracted like a sword in a sheath. He walked over to my legs that were covered by the sheet, and, scowl, I was hoping you'd enjoy my little treat. He pulled off the sheet, and my legs were gone. It was as if they'd been cut off by a saw. A bloody pool was where they once lay. I yelled out in horror and tried to get away, but he leaned over and grabbed my chest. He leaned in so close I could smell his foul breath. He said all that meat on your legs was going to rot, and I would never cook a woman in such poor health. Besides, watching you eat your own mother is not half as exciting as watching you eat yourself.